You are listening to Practical and Woo by Mindset and Manifest. My name is Eden, and I invite you to embark on a journey with me to explore the practical and spiritual edges of the unknown for the purpose of allowing you to embody and empower yourself uniquely as you are and to intentionally create and live a life of freedom and fulfillment. Each week, I am going to discuss topics such as energetics, reality creation, manifestation, astrology, tarot, and more to help empower you to live beyond perceived limitations and to practically design your life so it feels like absolute magic every step of the way. Let's dive in. Well, hello, brilliant soul. Today, I want to offer you food for thought. The kind of food for thought that makes it feel like there are hidden clues for prosperity, happiness, and fulfillment, hidden amongst the normalcy of the things that we have come to accept in our day-to-day lives. One of these things in particular is the concept of currency, as in the different types of money that exist for different countries. How peculiar that we would use this particular word to define this thing, especially because it's talking about currents, as in fields of energy. Money is one of those subjects that still to this day carries a lot of baggage. Most people want it, many people are scared of it, others feel it's hard to come by. Some think it will fulfill them as an essence unto itself. In fact, there's a quiet assumption that sits beneath much of our striving for money, and it's that abundance itself is measured primarily in how much money one is able to acquire. That wealth is quantified in digits, that security is stored in our bank accounts, that freedom is something to be purchased, that value becomes verified through financial exchange. We have inherited this assumption so thoroughly that it rarely feels like an assumption at all. But what if there's actually a clue, a codex that has been situated under our noses all of this time? What if money is simply a feature of a greater river of abundance that has always been moving through and around you? What if it's always been a current or currency that is accessible to you, alongside other features of exchange that also define what it means to be abundant? Both ancient traditions and modern physics suggest that everything is energy. And if this is the case, then we can allow ourselves to see that money is a symbol, a vehicle that represents something greater. Money shows how value is exchanged, but it's not itself value. In other words, money's an instrument within a grander system of exchange, and we must not allow ourselves to confuse the instrument with the source. What if it's not money that creates abundance, but actually abundance that creates money? And with this, what else can be considered abundance? What else exists in a field of currency? In what ways can we consider time, attention, trust, reputation, skill, creativity, emotional intelligence, beauty, health, and relationships to be currencies as well? How do each of these tenets flow, accumulate, transfer, appreciate, or depreciate in your life? For example, when someone important to you gives you their attention, notice that for a moment. Does it feel enriching to you? Do you feel filled up in some way? When this same someone withholds trust from you, do you constrict, feel a bit emptied, perhaps a bit scarce? We are already participating in a vast network of energy every single day. You contribute to it with your focus. You invest in it with your time. You allocate with your emotional connection, and you diversify with your skill sets. You compound through your habits. And whether or not you've ever looked at it this way, you're already managing a portfolio of currencies that exist in your world. When we trace the word currency back to the Latin root, it directly translates to mean to run or to flow. It is the design of currency to not sit still. It's conceived as something that's meant to flow, similar to how a running river oxygenates the banks around it, or how our blood nourishes our tissue, or even how flowing breath is what sustains life. Let's for a moment consider attention as a form of currency. Your attention runs towards what you value. If you fixate on threat, your attention pulls around the perceived danger and your internal world begins to feel hostile. If you invest your attention in growth, in learning, in making meaningful connections, then those are the areas that will expand. This same principle applies to anything and everything that could be considered a currency, including money. If you relate to money as something that must be gripped tightly because it may never return, you will unconsciously restrict both its giving and receiving. You may hesitate to invest in opportunities that could multiply its value. You may resist charging appropriately for your work because you fear others may not be able to afford it. You may avoid generous gestures because you feel if you gain something, then it means it's a loss for someone else. Stagnation, however, is not abundance. Instead, it's a fear attempting to halt the river that is meant to move. It's a defensive structure built in response to perceived threat. And it's an assumption that if you can control the flow, then you can control the allocation and the outcome. But control is not necessarily the same thing as security. Security arises from the trust in your capacity to generate, to adapt, and to participate in the currency. When trust is truly and meaningfully present, you do not need to immobilize the river. There is also a deep layer here that intersects with the concept of identity and the law of assumption. If you assume that money is scarce and that you are perpetually at risk of losing it, then your nervous system will treat every outflow as a threat. And that threat response has a way of prioritizing short term preservation more than long term growth. You may be led to make decisions that protect the present at the expense of your future expansion. In contrast, if you assume that you are part of a living current of exchange, then the outflow is not automatically interpreted as depletion, and the areas that you then choose to invest in become strategic allocation of energy rather than a risky gamble. Because you're able then to recognize that the river runs and has always meant to run circularly, both in, out, and back in again. Abundance is not about having piles of things. It's actually a pattern. And you get to see how you operate within that pattern of abundance by the way you feel within your own life in any given moment. Imagine that abundance is this vast river system that feeds into a wide, expansive ocean. This river system has many branches that form the sum of its parts. There are, let's say, streams of creativity and opportunity, as well as underground springs of intuition and timing. Money is one visible channel in this system, but it's fed by countless unseen sources as well. If you stand on the bank of one narrow stream and declare yourself poor because that singular stream appears dry, you may miss the fact that the water is flowing abundantly through so many other channels around you. Perhaps your relational currency is rich. Perhaps your creative currency is overflowing, or your intellectual currency that's sharp and valuable. Perhaps your health currency is strong and vital. The psychological impact of this reframing is immense. Scarcity thinking narrows our perception. When you are convinced that only one form of currency counts, you become blind to the wealth you already have filling your whole world, without being willing to see the ways you are beaming with abundance in your life. You continue to solidify a lack mindset in that you believe that you are always without. From here, it's no wonder we feel the world is against us or we make defensive choices. From this place, it's no wonder we undercharge because we fear being rejected, or we overspend because we're seeking proof of our worth. From here, it's no wonder we procrastinate because we feel behind, or we avoid investing in ourselves because we do not trust the river to replenish. We allow ourselves to believe that once it's gone, then it's gone. I have always found it interesting that language around money is much more positive in the business setting than in the colloquial setting. In business, you invest money, you appreciate money, you compound money, you allocate money. In everyday life, we spend money, and money costs other things from us. Things are either expensive or cheap. I have often wondered why it is that things are this way. And I wonder if the general way of describing the currency of money versus the business way of describing money defines why it is that business is the arena where money goes to play, grow, and expand. What about other energetic currencies as well? How are we talking about our health, our time, our beauty, our relationships, or ourselves? All of this is simply food for thought. But it does beg the question, those of us who feel we are struggling with money, is it that we are struggling with the numbers themselves? Or are we struggling with our identity and relationship to the currency of value exchange? How do we see ourselves? Do we see ourselves as someone who can steward large sums in and out of our lives? Do we trust our capacity to hold abundance without losing ourselves? Have we inherited stories about greed, virtue, or about who deserves what? The answers to these questions paint the current that is operating beneath your conscious awareness that's shaping your behavior. If you identify as someone who is bad with money, you will unconsciously create scenarios that confirm this. If you identify as someone who always struggles, then you will interpret neutral events as evidence of struggle because the mirror effect of reality creation is ruthless in its consistency. Yet there is a seed of liberation here as well. If our identity precedes our behavior and our behavior shapes our results, then the most leveraged place to intervene is at the level of our identity. So I want to ask you, what does it mean to identify as someone who is inherently abundant regardless of circumstances? What if you began to catalog all of your currencies, not just money? Include in your list your ability to generate ideas, your capacity to connect deeply and meaningfully with others, your resilience, your transferable skills, your learning, your network, your intuition, your discipline. When you believe that money is the sole indicator of success, you measure yourself relentlessly against others. You feel behind, inferior, and exposed. But when you see abundance as multidimensional, you allow yourself to recognize that people are wealthy in different currencies at different times, and you can have it all. Someone, though, may have financial surplus but a relational deficit, and others may have this creative brilliance but a physical burnout. The ledger is complex, and no one necessarily holds every currency in equal proportion at all times. But all is available to us whenever we so choose to accumulate those specific currencies in our lives. Abundance is not something you acquire, it's something you align with. It's the recognition that life itself is a continuous exchange. And when you step into the identity of someone who participates in this circulation rather than someone standing outside begging for entry, you become a conduit and a container rather than a drain. This is where the feeling of empowerment becomes inevitable. If you are already a node in a vast network of energetic exchange, then your task is not to prove your worth, but to allow for it to flow. That may mean increasing your capacity to receive without guilt. It may mean increasing your willingness to charge appropriately for your work. It may mean releasing your beliefs that convince you that having wealth is morally wrong. It may mean finally investing in yourself. To feel wealthy in all areas of your life is not to deny areas of growth. It's to recognize that wealth is broader than cash received. And when you cultivate gratitude for the currencies already present in your experience, you signal to your subconscious that abundance is your baseline. And from there, you create more. Money will continue to matter because there will be bills to fulfill and there will be dreams that require funding. But money is no longer to be perceived in this love-hate way. Money no longer has to be this temptress or this villain that we allow to rule our lives, simply a vehicle in which we allow our own value to flow as part of the currency of abundance. Allow the current to flow because the only thing required of you is the willingness to enter the water and trust that you are never separate from its source. Until next time.